Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here talking about one of my favorite topics, the ism of ageism. So this is the title here, Aging, Everybody's Doing It. So no matter how old you are aging. You start aging from the day that you were born. And we have stickers that represent that as well, so stop by our table. Very excited to talk to you about all of this. All right, ageism. It is a stereotyping and discrimination based on people's age. I have a second bullet that says, does ageism also work against the youth? So think about that in your own lives. Like, have you, as a young person, been discriminated by based on your age? I have students who are managers and they're very young, and people will say, oh, I need to speak to a manager, and they're like, I am the manager. And so that happens in a lot of different ways. So it's a systematic form of oppression, but unlike other causes of inequity like racism, sexism, ableism, we all could potentially experience ageism. If we grow old enough, if we are lucky enough to grow old enough, we might experience that. It can happen on an institutional level, an interpersonal level, and internalized ageism. So that's a big one, and that's why I'm really excited to be here to talk to you all about this, so you can start recognizing those thoughts in your own experience, and hopefully with some awareness start switching that to change. So ageism can vary by situation. Hostile ageism involves someone having overly aggressive beliefs about age. Some people think, and we'll see teenagers, and they'll think they're violent just based on their age and how they present themselves. By contrast, there's benevolent ageism, and that involves someone having patronizing beliefs towards people based on their age, and such as like that older adults are childlike and require guidance with certain tasks. That also happens, and maybe think about the older adults in your own family, that people want to keep their elders safe. Like, they want to protect them. They want to make sure that they are, not tripping over a rug. And then they kind of forget their personhood and in the name of keeping mom or grandma safe. And another way to categorize ageism depends if someone's conscious of it or not. So this whole diversity day, there's talk, there'll probably be talk about implicit biases and explicit. So if you are acting in an ageist way, but you don't realize it, that's sorry, I lost my notes, implicit ageism. And that could be like a doctor treating someone differently based on their age. I went to the doctor a few years ago because I had some knee pain, and they were like, well, based on your age, it's arthritis. And I said, well, based on nothing else hurting, I'd really like to look into this. And it was a torn meniscus, but I had to advocate for myself. And so sometimes people don't feel that comfort level, especially when they're talking to a professional. And so I had to say that and say, hey, yeah, no matter my age or my size, I really would like this looked into, because it does feel odd. There's a great speaker, Ashton Applewhite, who has a TED Talk, and she'll say in her talk that her one knee was hurting and she'd blame it on age. And what she realized then was like, the other knee's not hurting and it's the same age. So really start to look and think about what are you attributing to age? And so this would be a good time to look at your own internal talk. And we'll learn more about that as I go on here today. Let's see if I can, oh, I got excited. All right. So just some facts here about aging, which I love. So in the past century, human life expectancy increased nearly twofold. That exceeds the number of years added in all prior millennia. Like we are new at this aging thing, so it's really understandable that we don't really know how to do it all that great, because we have grown older. The statistics that I always like to talk about are, 100 years ago, I would likely be dead, because the life expectancy for women at that time was 47 years old. And so that idea of like, we have really started aging as a society. And as of 2020, for the first time, there were more people on Earth over the age of 65 than under the age of 5. And so what happens is that we used to have this pyramid. So if you look up statistics, if you get into that kind of numbers thing with graphs and charts, we used to have like a big base of younger people going to the oldest of old. And now it's becoming more of a rectangle. So in even maybe an inverted triangle based on new numbers. And what that means is that as people are aging, you know, who are taking care of them? How are they getting the services that they need? And when you have the triangle, you have this big, strong base, and now we're a rectangle. I won't get into the stats, but I do like that as a visual. And globally, more than 600 million people are aged 65 years of age and older. And this is expected to exceed 1.6 billion by 2050. Representing nearly 20% of the world's population. And that means that there's lots of opportunities to embrace our own aging, the aging around us, and how do we provide services? How do we provide things that help support people aging well? And that's the real goal. I work for the Sanford Center for Aging, and we believe in this model of like, you know, living a full life up until the end of your life versus this kind of like, oh, here we'll just set older people into a corner. And finally, the population of individuals aged 80 or older will increase more than threefold, reaching nearly 500 million globally. And that means we need to look at how we view aging, right? So if we just like set everyone aside and say like, oh, if you're over this age, then you don't count, you don't matter, we're talking about a large percent of our population. And if we're lucky enough, we'll be part of that population. Whenever I read the statistic about 2050, I always have to do the math and be like, how old will I be? I'll be 80. And so I'll fit into that demographic. And so hopefully, I did my degree at a later age. And of course, I always say that I wouldn't have if I didn't think that I was going to live till at least 100. And so thinking about that, like, and I don't know that, we don't ever know that, but that is my hope, is that I get to live into these advanced ages. All right, attitudes towards older adults. We've talked about the prejudiced, but stereotypes include illness, lack of relevance, and incompetence. So we have, and think about that. Like, do you ever pass someone who's driving and you're like, ugh, they're old. Of course they don't know how to drive. And, you know, I'm guilty of it myself. I'll be like, but I usually have a more benevolent ageism there. I'll see someone who's driving slow, maybe I get frustrated, and they'll be like, oh, they're older. And that's just as demeaning, but it's just more benevolent. It's just a little nicer view towards that. There's also, a thought about this expectation, like retire from jobs already, and you know, secede your influence, because we're the younger people and we're coming up and we need jobs. And people are staying in the workforce longer. People are engaged and want to stay engaged and employed longer than they ever have before. 65 was, you know, kind of a made up law that was passed to support, you know, like, okay, here you're retiring and you'll get Social Security. My grandpa Jimmy was 96 when he passed away. He proudly said that he was on Social Security for more years than he actually was ever employed, because he lived that much longer. So we're changing things. We're looking at things in a very different way. There can also be this thought that there's burden on ambitious younger generations. So like, how do we take care of people? And I mentioned that in the triangle, not as a burden, but as a reality. And we believe that any any career that you're interested in can benefit from learning a little bit more about gerontology and inclusivity for the older population. And then positive, okay, so I'm getting the hang of this. Positive ageism includes like tax breaks, discounts, housing programs for elders. When I turned 50, or right before I turned 50, I got my AARP packet, and I was like, I took a picture with it. I was like, oh my God, okay. And it was during COVID, so I still have not used my benefits at a restaurant or otherwise. I told my husband, I'm like, I'm gonna take you out. But we haven't, I forgot about it until just now. But anyways, but at the time when we got it, it was right in the thick of COVID. And then this, oh, I think I switched ahead. I'm gonna stop with the clicker. People are motivated to maintain a distance from reminders of mortality. And so this kind of combines my other area of study, which is grief and death and dying. And so people, when they're like facing, and they don't wanna think about mortality, they don't wanna think about the end of their life. And so this idea of pushing back actually then pushes back against aging. And even older people might disassociate from being old. I was telling this story to some people who stopped by our table. My dear friend, who's 6 months older than I am, she was complaining about like aches and pains, and this was, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago now. And I was like, well, that's weird. Maybe it's because she has kids that she doesn't feel good. I don't know. We don't have kids. And so she was like saying that, oh, she'd, be creaky and in pain and not sleeping well and fatigued. And she's like, oh, aging is really hard. And I kept thinking, that doesn't make sense. 7 years later, she was diagnosed with Lyme's disease. And so she did not get the medical help that she needed because of her attribution towards her own aging and her negative attribution towards her own aging. So she actually was, kind of missed out on years of like treatment and trying to like pull this back so that because she was disassociated, her aging mind and her internalized ageism really impacted that. All right, social construction of aging. So while aging itself is biological, what it means to be young or old is actually socially constructed. It means that there's no inherent cultural meaning to the biological process of aging. So when we talk about culture and we look at our own culture, and we tend to really celebrate youth, and there's a lot of treatments to try and maintain your youthful appearance, then that actually is a social construction. It has really nothing to do with the biological aging. It's just what we value and what we think is important. And values ascribed to young versus old. This varies cross-culturally. For example, old tends to be more revered in Japan, and it was more revered in the past. So when you think about aging in the past, people who lived to an advanced age, again, thinking of that triangle, those were the people that were passing down knowledge. Those were the people who were sharing their wisdom with their communities. And with the kind of industrialized age, and certainly with the Google, we don't have that same need, although I would say that it's still more valuable to hear from older adults and to learn from them, because there's power in that. There's power in being able to have those conversations. And today there is a biomedicalization of old age. So old is treated as kind of pathological, and how can we fix this? How can we solve for the problem of aging? And so what is old also varies by profession. So thinking about like what professions people are in. If people are in really physical jobs, or people who had been athletes for a lot of their younger years, they're going to have an impact with their joints, their ligaments, their different things. And so the wear and tear on the physical body is going to vary how old the body is feeling or presenting. And then there's consequences by gender, class, and ethnicity. And again, this happens to be where, so aging men tend to be celebrated and like, ooh, the salt and pepper hair, whereas women tend to have this like, oh, once you're out of this one age where childbearing, really, then you're no longer viable. This is changing culturally, but think about media that you see. Think about how people are portrayed in their older adult years. It's an important thing to start opening your eyes to. You can also think about cards, like the gift card, greeting card aisle, and cards on aging, and how many, cards have that, kind of little tongue-in-cheek or disparage aging. It's one of the last isms that we really kind of allow for that, and we actually invite it into our own world. And so I'll get into that a little bit more. And then, consequences depending on the availability for health management, because aging, like I always love to say, you don't just wake up 80, you become 80. And so the things that you're doing today are going to impact your aging. And that means, do you have access to healthcare? Do you have access to helping, support your living right now so that you are able to age well? I love this next. So it's a little hard to see here, and I'll offer up my slides later. This breaks down the generations, and how they're named actually is based on when the members of that generations become adults. The chart that I have here goes up to 100. Certainly there's people today living past 100, but this is where I started, and the chart's nicer. I don't mean to exclude anyone. So the people who were born around World War II, and before, that's the generation that they're called. Oh.
People are in Gen Z. Raise your hand. And wait, what were the age category? 10?
10 to 25.
And what do you think that means? Who are you? She's about to tell you. See if you agree with me.
Well, I think they should tell me who they are. I actually didn't have a setup for Z's. Thank you. I feel that deeply. John Hughes really shaped us. And I'm not going to go there. Okay, so Gen Z, I was actually just saying the ages. I don't have a lot that I know about you all, except for that I teach many people in that category, and it makes me happy. And I don't feel that very different in age, but I know I am.
Let's just take a second.
Okay.
Because here they are. They're here. And they're going to be getting older too. And, that is what it is. But who are you? What are you thinking about? What characterizes your group? What are you thinking about? Are you more globally aware, maybe? Yeah, how so? How so? Say how. Say how. Say how? Yeah, how are you globally aware? What are you aware of?
Mostly glued to our phones. We're also seeing the news and all that.
Okay, technology.
Technology.
Oh, they're still all about technology, aren't they?
Yeah, they're the first generation that's been fully on tech.
You're all about the internet. Anyone else? Anyone else in Gen X?
Gen X, millennials, Gen X,
Gen Z?
Gen Z.
Gen Z, that people underestimate that generation. That's what they think.
They underestimate the generation. Are you in that Gen Z? Yep. And are you underestimated?
I think so.
How so? I don't want to underestimate you.
I think they think that we're very young and we're very open-minded.
Yes.
And I think that scares people.
Yeah, and you're exposed to a lot more, and the global world has shrunk through the internet, so you're seeing issues that I was never exposed to as a young person. I do like to talk about there's a thing with millennials and Gen Zs about hair and pants. Are you guys familiar with this? The middle part versus the side part, skinny jeans versus the mom jeans. It is quite hotly debated, and that is exciting because for the first time, even cultural changes like that are instantaneous, right? We can see them online, we can see them happening versus in a magazine, or maybe someone might not be exposed to that, but now it's I think it was We're Coming for Your Side Part was something that I saw. And so it is interesting to take a look at that. I just recently went middle part, so I'm trying. I mean, not for that reason, but someone was
See, middle part, there's the overlap.
oh yeah, and I'm looking over.
All right, I'll let you get going. I just wanted to acknowledge that we have people in these categories, and they're comparing, contrasting to see if that's who they really are. So be thinking about that. That's the big picture question, right? Are you who she's trying to say that you might be? Think about it.
Yes, and I will not be telling any of you what you are. You can stop by my table and tell me. I'm really excited to hear that. I just like to show that there's a breakdown in how we categorize, especially doing research, and we have but it's also arbitrary, right? Because for a long time we were looking at the boomers in this huge span, and now it's been delineated and shortened. So that is a key piece here. All right. Okay, terms I would like to talk about. So, seniors, older adults, elderly, elders. So many people refer to older adults as elderly, and I'm going to invite you all to take that out of your language, and because it really does imply a frailty, kind of an inadequacy, and certainly some older adults are frail. Some older adults do fit into that elderly category, but quite honestly, I know 60, 70, 80-year-olds who would be really offended if they were called elderly. I had really been pushing for the term elder, and a lot of our team has, because it implies a respect and a dignity. However, there was a recent study that came out where older adults were asked what they want to be called. if you ask an older adult what they'd like to be called, they would generally like to be called their name. But as a group, if you are calling them that, they had replied to this very large study saying they wanted to be called an older adults. That was their preference. Senior gets a little confusing, especially when you're on campus or thinking about like a 4-year degree. You know, you talk about a senior and it could be implied with or high school. You know, we have different vernaculars for that. So it is important. Language matters, and how we refer to older adults really does kind of inform how we start thinking about our own aging. So if you're ever a student in my class, which I hope some of you will be, I will always coach you on not saying elderly, unless you deliberately mean elderly. All right, elder speak. Has anyone heard this term before? I see a hand over there. How about over here? Okay, elder speak, that is actually a slow, simplified communication, often with a sing-song cadence that sounds a lot like baby talk. So sometimes people will see an older adult and they'll be like, "Hi, how are you?" And then, and that is demeaning. It can also be like terms of endearment that are used kind of inappropriately to a stranger, like, "Hi, honey." People might speak louder if they see someone with white or gray hair or that looks a little bit older. They might use shorter statements, speak a little bit slowly, and they might be overly caring or controlling, which goes back to what I was saying about the keeping the mom or the grandma safe. And so when you're doing this, and I started working in the field of aging 33 years ago as a nursing assistant and when I did, I was guilty of all of this. And then when I learned that, I was like, oh, cringing at my younger self, and then going like, okay, well, how can I make this different? Well, I can share this information and know better, do better. And so I broke the for my friend Virginia, who's 95, we were out one day, and so I'd learned about this concept. This was, I don't know, a decade or so ago, and we were out shopping. And throughout the entire day, she would have been 85 at the time, throughout the entire day, I was aware of this. When we went to the bank, it was, "Hi, honey, how can we help you? Why are you here today?" And then at the restaurant, the server looked over her completely, looked at me and said, "What would she like?" And I'm like, I don't know what she would like, And so there can be these assumptions and these ways that we're interacting. And then, I don't know, there was a third example that's escaping me, but in that, when we talked about that day, and I told her my reflections on what I was seeing and perceiving, it was like it blew her mind. And now she talks about that all the time. She'll be like, "Oh, I was out with my daughter-in-law and they didn't even talk to me," which has only gotten more. And I was like, I shattered the glass for her on that. But she's aware of it, she knows what's happening, and then she can talk to the people in her life about it. Okay. This is a fun one, media and marketing. And I'll invite you to also continue to look for this for yourselves. So our bodies do change throughout our lives. However, we have this message, and this is an actual real book, How to Not Look Old. And she also has something about fatness, which I was like, anyways, but the title. So the taglines here are fast and effortless ways to look 10 years younger, 10 pounds lighter, and 10 times better. Implying again that looking young is better, looking thin is better. And these are the messages that are coming into our being at all times. There's an emphasis on transforming the body to stop the clock. There's anti-aging beauty products, plastic surgery. There's an advice industry that has really boomed. I'll give you the numbers here in a little bit. But then the body becomes a battleground because it becomes this kind of fight and way to push back aging and not want to have that happen. When I moved here, I came here from Minnesota. a lot more humid, a lot more moisture. So when I moved here, you know, my skin was really dry. So I went into one of the local shops and I said, hey, you know, I've just moved here, my skin's really dry. And they looked at me and they gave me something called Hope in a jar. And I didn't know that you could buy Hope, much less in a jar, but they had this product. And I was like, I mean, is it going to help because my skin's dry? Like, is this? So it was a really interesting mix of like, I'm talking about environment changes, and they're perceiving me as someone older who needs hope. So, you know, be aware of that. There's also, I have students who are very young, but they start early because the message is, I'm all about, I mean, take care of your skin. Like, that's super important. Wear sunscreen. I'm not about that. But I have a lot of students who have actually started using, in their like late teens to early 20s, started using products so that they are, you know, doing the anti-aging treatments already. And that's okay. Like, take care of yourself in whatever way makes sense for you, but also pause, think critically, what is important, and are you doing this because it feels good for you, or are you doing this because it's an important thing culturally or something that's seeped in and it's actually making you feel bad about yourself? And just a few, the costs. So the cost of anti-aging. In 2020, Americans spent $16.7 billion on plastic surgery. And yeah, no, yeah, be shocked. Yes, please be shocked. And 42.9%, so almost 43%, were men and women ages 35 to 50. And they were looking at, you know, anti-aging or body contouring procedures. So not necessarily really big, you know, investments into like pretty extreme surgeries, but, you know, in that range. So that was almost half. And then about 28% of men and women 51 to 64 invested in actual surgical procedures. I did a study where we interviewed 30 women ages 65 and older. We talked about body image. We talked about health and how they perceived themselves, along with like relationships and changes. This is a really, really cool study. And I had women, we asked them about the term aging gracefully, we asked them about what's natural aging, and people, of course, had a variety of perspectives. So it wasn't just like, oh, all plastic surgery is bad. I had one woman who thought that it was really important for her to have a facelift at a certain time so that she could continue on in her profession. She was very happy with her choice. She made it deliberately. So again, it's not about saying don't do this and don't do that. It's about like how are you doing it, and the awareness to know that you're making these choices for yourself, for your own happiness, versus trying to please other people or do this, that, you know, in my previous slide, the stop the clock or the body as a battleground. And then other people were like, no, I've earned every wrinkle, I've earned every stretch mark, and I'm happy with it. That's great too. And so we again, we don't wake up 80, so this lifespan approach, you know, you are who you are, and what's important to you will probably continue or strengthen and maybe change with more information, like it did for me with Elder Speak. All right, our future selves. Oh man, this is a big one. So how we talk about elders today actually impact how we view ourselves in the future as we age. So this is actually impacting that. So if you talk about aging or people who are aging negatively, you're internalizing that. You're bringing this into your own experience and saying like, aging is bad. So guess what? When you turn 30, when you turn 40, when you turn 50, it becomes kind of this pushback and this real difficult thing to be with. I have friends who, you know, when they reach 30, it's like devastating for them. And so ageist views also can lead to poor mental and physical health. And this is an important thing. Again, it goes back to the story I shared about my dear friend who, you know, had Lyme's disease, but she was basing all of these aches and pains and difficulties on aging, so she didn't seek medical help. And again, for me and my knee, I had to really advocate to have it looked into more versus just a line in the sand of like, well, you're X amount of age, I don't remember how old I was at the time, and this is arthritis. And then just a little side note here, a pretty extensive research study showed that older adults with more positive self-perception of aging lived 7.5 years longer on average. So that's something to think about. So how do you think about aging? How is that impacting your experience of aging? How is it impacting how you view yourself, how you look at yourself in the mirror, how you talk about and to yourself? I should also say that I'm a meditation and mindfulness instructor, so all roads lead to meditation for me, and mindfulness and mindful awareness. And so with awareness, you can make changes. And so how are you talking about aging? How are you talking about people who you know who are aging? How are you having these conversations? Knowing that if we're lucky enough, we will be old enough to have this experience, and how do we want to meet that? So here's antidotes to ageism. Here's the solution, right? So awareness. Acknowledge our prejudice about age and aging. So again, the first thought that comes to your mind, it happens. That's the first thought. What comes out of your mouth, the next thought, that's the ones you're responsible for. And you have that with awareness. Integration, connecting with people of all ages. And that's, again, I started this talk talking about ageism, how it impacts people who are young and old. And so how are we connecting? How are we engaging? Again, this could be, some people go to communities and they live in a community of like a 55 plus, and they're only surrounded by people their age. On one hand, it seems like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. They're with their peers, they are doing activities, there's all of these things that they're enjoying doing, but they're not getting that engagement with younger people. They're not understanding. They might be, my people left over here, I'm gesturing towards the people who talked here, but they might be dismissing them because they don't actually know them. And we know through research, through our own experiences, that when we get up and close and personal with people and get to know them, then we understand that person and their experiences a little bit better. So it helps to shake up those ageist notions and the stereotypes that we do hold. So integration is really important see, I do talk with my hands a lot, I told you. So integration is important on all ages. So activism, watch for ageist behaviors, attitudes in and around us, challenge them, and create language and models that support every stage of life. Oh man, I am such a buzzkill. Like I mean, if there's even a hint of like an ageist conversation, I'm like, well, and my husband will be like, dude, it's a joke. And I'm like, no, it's a joke that is harmful. And so again, and my father-in-law called and I was like, oh, how are you doing? And he made some comment about, well, getting old is whatever. And I started to do my little like spiel, and Charlie's in the background going like, no. He's like, just let them have it. But it is important to watch for that language. It is important to acknowledge it and maybe, not send those funny cards about aging, and acknowledge that, kind of life is precious and every day we get to learn and grow, and that doesn't stop when you reach a certain age. Again, I wouldn't have done a PhD and graduated when I was 51 if I didn't think that I was going to live a long life. And so we can reinvent ourselves, we can continue to learn and grow at all ages. And I'll leave you with this quote. It is an African proverb that was shared by Dr. Kalibi. Sorry, I might be pronounced Kalibi. The print is small, sorry. But the youth can walk faster, but the elder knows the road. So the youth can walk faster, but the elder knows the road. Thank you so much for your time, hanging out with me and learning about this topic.
Let's give a big round of applause. Thank you so much. I learned so much. And I think I made an ageist joke when we first met. We did, because I'm turning 60 in May, and so it's like this big thing on my mind. All right, so it is. But I did. I was ageist. So you corrected that. Thank you.